we're talking about power grids right now and substations. The ability to look at the redundancies of a substation and where it's most vulnerable and how it can be taken out with the least effort is unconventional warfare 101.
And it's a joke. What are some of the points of our infrastructure that you think that they would find ripe for a hit?
Well, I would say the first thing is that anything that would hinder our ability to use these things. I mean, we have become, this is something I talk about in my book, but we are essentially in a collective trance state with these things. We live here. We live in this arena, in this, in this represented realm, this digital realm. We don't live in the natural world. So I think anything where they could alter our ability to work on these phones, be in these phones, anything with the power grid, anything that, because we've become so reliant. A friend of mine recently, his wife had a C-section, and I think there was a hack, was it on Microsoft or one of the telecoms, but they had to delay the C-section for 24 hours because of a hack that had happened on a telecom.
Are these guys hacking too? Terrorist organizations?
Well, again, I think and it would be interesting, maybe you look at bringing some folks on that can address that, but I do think there's a level of collaboration between state and non-state actors that makes hacking very viable.
Do you know somebody that I should talk to about this?
Let me stew on it, and I'll talk to some folks too, but I think that would be because when you start talking about vulnerabilities, obviously we want to be careful there, but again, at the same time, if we're talking about it in a conversation, you can bet that bad actors have long since been looking at it and are actively targeting. So I don't think it's not like you're talking about classified. What I think though is we've got to start having these red cell type conversations. Like, for example, we're talking about power grids right now and substations. I mean, the ability to look at the redundancies of a substation and where it's most vulnerable and how it can be taken out with the least effort is unconventional warfare 101.
And it's a joke. I want to paint how easy this is. I touch on the power grid all the time. I've had entire episodes dedicated to just exactly how weak our power grid is. And if you don't believe me how easy it would be to attack a power grid, drive around, find a substation, tell me how that's guarded.
Yeah.
The only thing that separates that from the external world is a chain link fence.
Right. And to that point,
most of them don't even have a padlock to get in.
And to that point, when we talk about people that have come across the border and bad actors, right? Anybody who is trained in subversion and sabotage, which is the meat and potatoes of unconventional warfare that you're talking about, whether that's from China, whether that's a sabotage expert from Iran or Al-Qaeda, the first rule of thumb is that kind of thing. Is like anything where you can disrupt at a strategic level with minimum risk and minimum output, right? And that's what you're talking about. When you're talking about these substations and other pieces of infrastructure, it's very, very vulnerable. And the fact that you've got all of this flood of potential bad actors who are trained in that, then to me, it's just mind-boggling that we're not leaning into that and saying, all right, well, if these things have occurred, then what can we at least do to mitigate at a state and local level, and at least have conversations that would prepare communities for this kind of thing as best we can. That's not happening. I mean, that's just not happening. There's not a conversation around this. And I think for me, as a global war on terror veteran who saw 9/11, who lost his Ranger buddy in the Pentagon that day, and who lost a lot of friends in the war that followed, it just seems criminal to me that we would put ourselves back in this position again where communities are so at risk and we would not have at least have responsible conversations on how to mitigate at this point. And instead, it is literally head in the sand. Let's focus on the economy, which I get it, but it's not going to matter, if we've exposed ourselves to what I think we've exposed ourselves to. And no one's going to care about those other things when the reckoning comes for that. It's going to all be, the next 9/11 commission. How did this happen? With a bunch of congressmen harumphing on what should have been done and who knew what when. And to have that happen twice in, 30 years, it's just, it's disgusting,
I
frankly.
mean, I think the power grid is a very viable option for them. I mean, and then just going back to China. I mean, I've been talking about China for a long time now, and the control that they have over our power grid. And you know, a lot of people called me a conspiracy theorist for saying it. Oh, but guess what? A couple months ago, FBI Director Chris Wray comes out and says, "Hey, guess what? Turns out that China has infiltrated not only our power grid, but also our water treatment plants so that they could," and what that means for anybody that isn't tracking here with the, look, our power grid is not, China manufactures the huge, ginormous transformers. I think, if I remember correctly, if you took 9 of those out, country's out of power. It's done. They have to rip overpasses out. I mean, we're talking years to get another one of these in. On top of that, these that's if they were taken out by, I don't know, an EMP or a bomb, or they shot it or whatever. We don't check these for Trojan horse, malware, virus type things. I've talked to multiple people, General Robert Spalding, David Tice, Kash Patel. It's literally the push of a button, and from China, and our power grid is done. And so I think what would be a very viable option for a China Taliban type of thing, work together. I mean, China doesn't really have to do shit because Taliban and these terrorist organizations are so hungry to get us. They'll just do China's dirty work and be the face, just like we were the face overseas. Hey, that wasn't us that hit that target. That was the Afghans.
I think there's a lot of...
Hey, that wasn't us that took out your power grid. That was the terrorist organization. Oh, by the way, but we negotiated this while you guys were pulling out.
I think there's a lot of precedent happening right now for state actors to use non-state surrogates. You don't have to look far to see that happening. Look at Hamas, look at Hezbollah, look at the Tariqi Taliban. You know, look, it's happening all over the place. Like, there's precedent for this. This is not some kind of theory that state actors using non-state surrogates is a very, very viable theory, especially if those non-state surrogates are well-established, highly effective, combat-trained Islamist terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda, ISIS-K, who have a multi-century narrative to undo our way of life. It's a perfect match. And to think that that's not going to happen and that it's not, in the near future, something that's going to go down, I just think it's diluted, And now I think what we should be talking about is mitigation, and how do we have responsible conversations at state and local and federal levels about what we do about this. And what I'm seeing, honestly, I'm not seeing either administration talking about it enough, and I'm not seeing the media talking about it enough.
Yeah.
And I hope that something that comes out of this maybe will be some folks just going, man, well, look, let's just, could we actually have a pre 9/11 conversation instead of a post 9/11 conversation?
Well, I mean, it sounds like that's kind of happening, just not on the level that we would like it to be, but the federal government is not functioning. It's not. And they're not taking this seriously. I don't think they're really taking any of the threats against the U.S. seriously, but it does sound like some of the states are taking it seriously.
Yeah.
And so I know you and Sarah have been going around talking to. I know you talked to DeSantis. I think I called you once. You were on a flight to Texas, maybe.
We were going to go. We're trying to work that right now. That Alabama has shown some interest. We talked to State Senator Jay Collins, former Green Beret, about it.
How many states? I mean, it's refreshing to hear that states are realizing that the federal government is not functioning and probably completely gone. What states are actually taking measures into their own hands and wanting to hear what you and Sarah and Legend have to say about what's coming.
I mean, at this point, it's mostly been anecdotal responses to interviews that you've done with Sarah or me, and then a couple of where we've reached out and through contacts have actually gone into like the office of Governor DeSantis and sat with him and his chief of staff and had the conversation. It's not that many. I mean, honestly, and it's because if you stop and think about it for a second, everybody is running 100 miles an hour at every level, focused on their, political thing, whatever the flavor of the day is. That's what they're focused on. I mean, even when we've talked to some of the state and local politicians, they're so busy with all this other stuff. And so you try to elbow your way into the room and, hey, I'm a GWAT veteran and I'd like to talk to you about, the reemerging terror threat from Afghanistan. How do you like me so far? It's not like it's people are hungry to do that or to hear that. And it's like I said when we started this interview, we have a very short memory in this country.
I don't understand. I do not what is a higher priority than this? And second of all,
it should be the central issue in the election.
What looks better than the governor of your state coming out saying, hey, federal government isn't taking this shit seriously. This is a real threat. This is what our state is going to do to combat this.
Yeah, I would love to see that.
With a plan.
Man,
I mean, that's like, if I saw that, I'd be like, that's our guy. No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.